All right, so we got our discount rate, 6.3% for Walmart, so now we need the value Walmart. And to do that, we're going to use three models. We're going to use the dividend discount model, the capitalized earnings model, which is, remember, is my own Professor Sweet's creation, and then the H model, remember, that's getting more press and is getting better known, but is not as well known as the first one. The dividend discount model, also known as the Gordon growth model. So what inputs do we need? Well, the inputs we're going to need for these models are, we're going to need dividend 0, which is the dividend the last 12 months, TTM, trailing 12 months, the earnings per share, trailing 12 months, earnings per share 0, we're going to need a long-term growth rate, we're going to need an inflation assumption for the capitalized earnings model. We're going to need a short-term growth rate, and we're going to need the time period for getting from the short-term to long-term growth. All right, so let's look at each one of these. In your paper, you can write a few sentences on each one. But the first two are fairly straightforward. The dividend 0 and the earnings per share 0. We can just go to Yahoo Finance, put our company, WMT, and we see that the earnings per share is 505. And the dividend is $1.96. Make sure you pull the dollar, not the yield, $1.96. So that was easy. Those two are easy. The long-term growth rate, I'm going to say should, for Walmart, I'm going to say should match the assumption for nominal GDP growth. All right. Now, if your firm is growing really fast right now, for the Gordon growth model, you may use something a little bit higher than that. So if you think the U.S. economy, above we thought that was 5%. Think the economy is going to grow 5%, but you're doing a firm that's growing much faster than that, you might increase that to 5.5% or something just to show the extra growth. But you're definitely not going to increase it to 8, 9, 10%, because we're talking about the long-term growth rate for infinity. The inflation assumption, I'm going to use 2.5% to be consistent with what I used above and coming up with my nominal GDP assumption. And then the short-term growth rate, we have a few issues here we could adjust. One could be the PEG ratio approach. One could be sustainable growth. And the other one, we could look at historical growth. So we'll do each one of these. The PEG ratio approach says take the PE ratio and divide it by the PEG ratio, and that should be expected short-term growth. So for Walmart, we'll go back into the Yahoo Finance. I'm going to click on Key Statistics over on the side, and we see that their PE ratio is 15.97. And their PEG ratio is, see their PEG ratio here, 3.52. So 1597, 352. And it gives us a short-term growth rate of 4.5%. Not all that spectacular. But that's just one example. Another possible short-term growth rate would be the sustainable growth. Remember, sustainable growth is return on equity times retention. Retention is their dividend is 1 minus their dividend divided by earnings per share, which equals 1 minus, their dividend was $1.96, their earnings per share was 5.05. So if we do that, how much are retaining? If they're paying out $1.96 and their earnings were 5.05, we can do those two together. So plus 1 minus $1.96 divided by 5.05, and that tells us that the retention is 61%. Their ROE, we can get that out of Yahoo Finance as well. The return on equity, we come down here and just look for it. Return on equity is 19.93%. So their sustainable growth, given their current asset turnover and margins, is going to be 0.1993 times 0.61. And that gives me a much higher growth rate of 12%. You notice how I'm rounding things, which I think is perfectly fine because these are pretty ballpark estimates. All right, the 12% seems a little more reasonable to me because I know Walmart has been growing fairly well recently, and we'll look at that. And also they're expanding quite substantially in the US and especially having great success in Central and Latin America expanding. So it seems to me the 4.5 seems too conservative. But the last thing I can do is historical growth. And so what I can do with historical growth is I can go in to Bloomberg. Go into Excel. And if you're on the Bloomberg machine, you'll have to be on the Bloomberg machine to do this. If you don't have a Bloomberg account, you won't be able to do this, but it's actually fairly easy. If you're in the Financial Studies Center and go to the Bloomberg machine, you can type Bloomberg, import data, real-time data, historical end of day. I don't know why it did that, so let me, looks like we're having a technical issue, so let's see. I'll start this in the next video because we had a bug, and we'll try it from there.